Hello everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be talking about how the heck you get published. So you want to write a book, so you want to be published, so you want to see your book on bookshelves. Well, I'm going to tell you the kind of nitty-gritty, well, how the heck do you do that? So for starters, there are two primary paths for being published, and that is traditional publishing and self-publishing, also often referred to as indie publishing. In self-publishing, you're going to take care of everything yourself. This means you're hiring your own editors, cover designers. You research and pick out the publishing platform and format that you want to go with. You pay for all of that up front, and you do all of your own push, promotion, marketing, etc. You are both writer and publisher. You are in control of everything it takes to get your work published. Now, I am not an expert in self-publishing, but there are some really great resources, including here on YouTube, so I'm going to link you down below to some that I think that you should check out. I've also made a traditional publishing versus self-publishing video that lays out some of the pros and cons of both of them, which I will link to down below so that you have a bit more information. But the focus here is going to be traditional publishing, since I am a traditionally published author, and this is my area of expertise. Also, I find generally when people are like, well, how do I get published? They do tend to mean, well, how does all of that work? Like, I see a book in Barnes & Noble, how did it get there? And 95% of the time, the answer is what I'm going to explain in this video. So this is going to sound really, really dumb, but honestly, the first step of getting published is to finish a book. You're like, duh, but honestly, many people don't realize that you have to complete your novel before you seek representation for it, before you seek a publisher. You're not going to be able to reach out to industry professionals with an idea or even part of a book because they need to see the completed package. Because the reality is, a lot of people have great ideas, a lot of people can write some of a book, but not everyone can finish a book. Most people can't finish it and have it be really good, and then even fewer people are going to complete something, edit it, and have it be at the level it needs to be traditionally published. It is really difficult to be published. There are a series of gatekeepers, which I'm going to go over, because it's about the process of vetting a work so that it is as shiny and polished as possible when it reaches the shelves. There's just not enough bandwidth from agents and publishers to publish everything. That's just not how the world works. So it is definitely a numbers game. You have to really hone your craft and then jump over a lot of hurdles to be published. Personally, I feel it's worth it, and I will link down below to my video about why I decided to pursue traditional publishing for my debut and first couple of books. I do in the long run plan on doing hybrid publishing, but I had very specific reasons for doing traditional publishing, specifically for my category, YA, and honestly, it's made me a better writer. I've developed such a thick skin. I've learned to improve my craft, because if I don't, I'm not going to be good enough, and it's really worked out well for me. And in particular, a skill I've picked up is this next thing. The next step for you getting published after you finish the book is learning how to edit your own work. This is true for self-publishing as well. These first steps, you have to finish a book and you have to edit it before you can self-publish as well. And editing isn't just going through the lines and maybe making it a bit prettier. There's something called developmental editing. No story is going to be perfect on the first draft, the execution of the story. There's always a better way to execute certain aspects of your idea. It can be rewriting sections of your book so that it feels more active, more happens. It's working on your character development, your story arcs, etc. This isn't cosmetic editing, this is deep editing. So my advice here is to find critique partners. There's also beta readers, but I like critique partners. This is an exchange of work with other writers where you give each other feedback to use for your editing. There's a whole process of self-editing where you basically learn how to critically engage with your own work, understanding it's not perfect and you have to throw some of the baby out with the bathwater in order to make your work better. I also have a video on learning to self-edit, which I will link to down below. When it comes to hiring an editor, which you are going to do for self-publishing, and I don't advise you do for traditional publishing, those editors don't edit your book for you. You always are going to have to do the lion's share of the work of actually developing the story. Editors who you hire or work with at a traditional publisher, they'll help you with line edits, that's prose level writing, and copy edits, that is where they're going to correct your mistakes. But copy editing is one of the last steps. Before that, there's a ton of stuff that is all on you to do. So now we get to all of the gatekeeping steps and parts of the process for traditional publishing. This is where we diverge from self-publishing. So there's a whole system in place in traditional publishing to have your work reviewed by most publishers, and that is the agent system, the literary agent system. You can't directly submit to the majority of traditional publishers, especially the large ones. Again, it's a volume game. So many people want to be published, but the publishers just don't have time to do all that it takes to edit, typeset, do covers, write copy, etc. for the books that they've purchased, and review the thousands and thousands of books by aspiring writers, which is where literary agents come in. They are a first line of defense. They do the quality control for what is called the slush. Slush is writers sending in a query, which is a pitch letter, about their work. It's called cold querying. You don't have to know anyone to query. And the slush is what agents at literary agencies read and consider to try to find the gems, which then they send on to publishers to consider buying. So I mentioned queries. This is how you get a literary agent. You write a one-page pitch for your book. There are rules and formats for queries, and I'm not going to get into too much about them. I do already have querying videos on this channel, and look out for a new one as well that's going to be dropping really, really soon, and I'll put some of my favorite query resources down below. It's mostly about your book, not much about you and why you wrote it. You are basically writing marketing copy for your book to entice an agent to read it. Most often, agents allow you to include 5 to 10 pages of your book so that they can get a feel of your writing, and if they're interested in reading more, they will request either a partial, which is usually about 50 pages of your manuscript, or a full, which is of course the entire book. Now, it's a waiting game in queries. It can take a long time to query. Agents receive hundreds of queries a week. Some of them receive hundreds a day. And so there is definitely a waiting process there. And then once they request your book, there's a waiting process there as well. Generally speaking, the publishing process involves a lot of patience because it is not fast. Now, you should always query the best possible version of your book. Make sure it's been edited, you've really worked on it and polished it. You're putting your best foot forward. You usually only get one chance with an agent for a book. And once they've looked at your query and your pages and rejected it, that's it. And there are only so many agents that you can query for a given book. Make sure you're researching agents because not all agents are created equal. I'm going to link you down below to videos I have on red flags for bad agents because there are a ton of bad literary agents out there because anyone can call themselves a literary agent, but only some of them are actually good enough to sell books. Always look up what these agents have actually sold. And generally, this means you have to be very knowledgeable about the space that you want to enter. You should be reading books that are similar to the book that you've written. You should understand the market well enough to know, well, has this agent sold anything comparable to my book? Never query an agent you wouldn't want to accept representation from, which means don't query bad agents. I'll tell you, it is better to have no agent and give up on a book than to have a bad agent. A bad agent can derail your career for years and definitely kill that book anyway. So I advise focusing on your best work, querying the best possible people, and continuing to work on books until you can get the representation commensurate with the level of career that you want to have. Essentially, I don't think you can settle because there are levels of agents and the best agents can sell to the best publishers and they do get the best publishing deals. One last tip before I get into the best case scenario, which is an agent wants to represent you, and that is while you were querying one book, I recommend working on a new project. This way you feel a little less sting when you do get rejections, but also in the event that that book doesn't work out, you have something new to focus on and put out into the world to query next. I don't advise working on the second or, God forbid, third book of a series. You should never write an entire series until you've sold the first one. So work on something completely new that is not connected to the book that you are querying. Okay, so in a best case scenario, if an agent likes your book enough, they are going to ask you for a call and they're going to offer you representation. At this point, you will notify all other agents with your book, including queries that haven't been responded to, that you have an offer. When you do have that call with the agent, you're going to ask for 1 to 2 weeks to make a decision. This is normal. Never accept right away or feel pressured to accept quicker, because it is courtesy in the industry to inform all other agents that you do have an offer, because you want to give other agents the opportunity to also read your work and possibly offer representation. I want to remind everyone that the agent relationship is a business relationship, and it is a very important business relationship. You should be shopping around for the best possible representation. Querying, honestly, is a funny thing. When you start querying before you have offers, you are the desperate one. You are desperately trying to get someone to notice you, and you feel this power imbalance, and it shifts. As soon as an agent wants to represent you, all of the leverage goes to you, the author. And this is where it benefits you to notify other agents, because if you end up with multiple offers, all of a sudden you are in the position of power and you get to make the best decision for yourself and for your career. I also have tons of videos on talking to agents on the phone and making good business decisions. Again, going to link to all of those down below. Listen, I've been with a literary agent where it didn't work out to sell my work, and then I've gone on to find a literary agent who was a better fit for me, who has been able to sell my work multiple times. Finding the right agent for you is really important, as is writing a new book if the book that you have isn't working. I shelved a book that wasn't working in queries to get me the agent I wanted, and I wrote a book that got me where I needed to be. All right, so you've picked an agent, you're going to sign a contract. They're usually pretty standard, but sometimes not. Again, I have a video on this. I have a video on contract terms you need to know, which has a section on literary agent contracts, so I will link to that down below as well. If you have any qualms about a literary agent contract, ask questions, try to find someone who's more experienced in the industry, whether it's an author or legal representation, to look at it if you are concerned, but generally, most literary agent contracts are pretty straightforward, and it's just an agreement about how your relationship is going to work. So what's next? Next usually is you gotta edit your book some more with your agent. Agents do vary in terms of how editorial they are, but nowadays when it is really tricky to sell a book, most are doing a lot of editorial work before they submit to editors to make sure they are submitting very polished products to publishers. So once you get through that, you go on submission. What the heck is submission? So this is where your agent does their job. Agenting is all about networking and relationships. I mentioned they are that front line of defense. They are gatekeepers. Well, the publishers depend on them to have really good taste in really good books. And editors and publishers get to know the taste of different agents, and they get to know, well, I really trust that agent to send me excellent projects that are going to earn a lot of money. And your agent will meet with these editors for lunch and at conferences and get to know their taste, the kinds of books they like to read and are likely to buy. So then they take your book and they create a submission list. Submission is a whole process with a lot of moving parts, but generally they're going to send your book out in rounds of submission, so to groups of editors in stages. Rounds can really vary in size, so a round could be as small as 4 to 6 editors. A mid-sized round is usually like 10 to 15, and anything more than that is considered a large round of submission. Agents pitch editors in different ways. Some of them do it on the phone, some of them do it in person if they live in New York. And most commonly I find is just they will pitch editors over email the same way that you are going to send out a query. So it's a pitch letter for the book, inviting them to read, and then the editors will request to read the manuscript or not. Then you wait. again, there's a lot of waiting. It's really stressful, and submission really varies. Sometimes it goes super, super fast. If one editor just reads it right away and is really interested, they then decide they want to buy it. And so submission can go as fast as 48 hours, but it can also last more than a year. The dream, of course, is to sell really, really fast, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. You can also end up doing edits to your book between rounds of submission. So if you get rejections from many publishers that say the same thing, then you want to edit your book to address those things to make it stronger when you send it out to more editors. Okay, so what happens though when an editor does want to buy your book? You go to something called acquisitions. So this is a meeting that every publisher has. Many of them have them weekly, but it is going to depend on publisher, where all the different departments get together, so editorial, sales, marketing, publicity, etc., and the editors are pitching the books that they want to buy. They're going to do what is called a profit and loss statement, where they basically say, this book is great, I think it's going to appeal to these markets and make this much money. And then everyone discusses whether they like the book. Often the other departments have read it, but not always. And everyone basically hashes it out of like whether they think it's a good investment to buy your book. And so you either get through acquisitions and get an offer, or you don't get through acquisitions and it's a no. I have been rejected at acquisitions more than once. It is depressing, but when you get a yes, the editor is going to send a deal memo, an offer to your agent, and it'll say, we want to buy the book for this amount of money, for these territories, these are the royalties that we're offering, and then it's your agent's job to negotiate. Your agent should never accept the first offer that's sent. And if you end up with an agent who isn't negotiating, you have a problem with your agent. That's a whole other topic. But your agent's job is to get you the best possible deal, the best possible deal terms. And this is on the deal memo side of it. We'll talk about contract in a minute. So they're going to go back and forth with the publisher. And they're also going to inform all the other editors with your book that you have an offer. So then it's a matter of whether anyone else also wants to buy your book. Sometimes that first publisher wants your book so bad, they do something called a preempt. They preemptively offer a ton of money in terms for you, the author, and your agent to withdraw that book from everyone else and not even give them a chance to buy it. That's selling in a preempt. But you can also just have a single offer and not sell in a preempt. You can just sell your book to one publisher who wanted to buy it. But if multiple publishers want to buy your book, sometimes you go to auction. This is where different publishers do bids in rounds to compete to win the right to publish your book. This is more rare, but it's a very exciting thing that does happen and tends to drive up the price of those books. So once you've arrived at who is going to publish your book, whether it's one person who offered and your agent negotiated with them, or it's multiple offers and your agent went back and forth and negotiated the best possible deal for you, you will agree to your book deal. Then your agent's job is to negotiate your contract. Well, you are working with your new editor to polish your book, so yes, you're going to do more edits. This is when you do developmental edits with your editor, line edits, etc. Your agent is negotiating your contract. Now, there are the terms that were agreed to in the deal memo, but there's so much more that an agent does to negotiate your contract. Something I hear a lot from writers that they're scared of is that you sell your soul to a publisher and they own your book forever. But no, they don't if your agent is good at their job and negotiates a contract that works more in your favor. I will say, if you see a book contract where it says they own your book forever, beware of the term in perpetuity. That's a bad term. I would say you should run, but good agents don't let that happen to you. I usually have seen those predatory contracts from situations where a publisher knows that an author doesn't have an agent. So it's actually when you don't have an agent that you are more likely to get screwed over. And I just realized I haven't talked to you about money. Something very important to know. Your agent is your business partner and their job is to get you more favorable deal terms, that includes more money and favorable terms in your contract, and for that you do give them 15% of what your publisher pays to you. And the money actually goes through your agency. So your publisher pays your agency, and then your agency pays you. Again, this is a relationship thing. You want to go with a really good agent and a really good agency, because certain publishers prefer to work with certain agencies where, like, on the back business end, they're good at handling their finances and the publisher likes working with them because they're, good to work with from a business perspective. And then it's good for you because your agency pays you on time. There's all this business stuff that goes into it because publishing is a business. And you want to get all of these people working for you on your team so that you have the best possible experience. Also, very, very important in terms of money that I should say, in traditional publishing, money always flows to you, the author. You shouldn't have to expend any money to get traditionally published. And if someone is asking you for money, whether it's an agent or a publisher, that is a scam, and you should run away. This is just part of the deal of traditional publishing. They front all of the money to publish your book, and therefore you are only going to get a percentage of what that book sells because they're doing the lion's share of the work. You will typically be paid in advance against sales. I also have an entire video on this because money is complicated. But essentially, it's a sum that they agreed to pay you in installments. It's usually when you sign your contract, when you turn in your book, and when your book is published, or just when you sign your contract and when your book is published. So your advance is broken into chunks. You do have to pay taxes on it, guys, and it's a lot. And they're saying, we think this is how much you will earn in royalties when this book goes on sale. If you outsell that advance, then you begin to earn royalties, which is a percentage of every single sale. Again, your agent is negotiating a favorable advance, a favorable payment schedule, and a favorable royalty rate. And then it's your publisher's job after you've edited your book to do all of the things that are going to get it out in the world and get it sold. You want to know, how do you get published? How do you get a book in bookstore? This is how the sausage is made. Publishers have sales teams, and their job is to pitch your book to libraries and bookstores to get them to place orders to carry them in their stores. Traditional publishing has a long history of the relationship in the business, so they typically are best placed to get your book into physical distribution chains. It's definitely an advantage that traditional publishing has over self-publishing. That's the benefit of a good traditional publisher, their sales force and their distribution network. There's also a whole machine of marketing and publicity. There's cover design and back cover copy. It's all of this stuff that your publisher does for you to create that final product of your book. That is how do you get published in a nutshell, glossing over tons of stuff. As I mentioned, there's tons of links down below because I do like to go in depth about all of these micro topics on the channel, but I thought I would roll this all together as a 101 primer for those of you who just want to know, well, how the sausage is made. I wrote a book. How do I get it published? I hope I've answered all your questions. Let me know down below in the comments any questions that you do have, and if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. I will make more comprehensive videos about publishing. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, happy writing.